It was a calm moonlit evening when Obina drifted into a deep sleep. The soft hum of his ceiling fan and the rhythmic croaking of distant frogs lulled him into a sense of peace. But that peace was shattered by a sudden, piercing scream, a sound so wild and guttural it felt as if it was tearing through his very soul. He jolted upright, his chest heaving. It wasn't an ordinary sound, it was sharp, echoing, and deeply unsettling. A woman's voice, full of terror. Heart-pounding, Obina grabbed the torchlight on his bedside table and crept to his sitting room. He flicked on the light and stood still, straining his ears. The house was deathly quiet, the kind of silence that carried weight. He moved to the kitchen, his feet brushing against the cool tiles. Peering through the window, he scanned the compound outside. Shadows danced under the moonlight, but there was no sign of movement. The old wall clock ticked softly behind him. It was 11 p.m. Determined to uncover the source of the scream, Obina unlocked his door and stepped into the open compound. The night air was cool against his skin, carrying the faint smell of damp earth. He padded to the gate, his torchlight sweeping the corners. The heavy padlock hung undisturbed. He shook the gate slightly, it didn't budge. Everywhere was as it should be, yet the scream haunted him. His mind churned with unease as he made his way back to the house. Just as he settled on the edge of his bed, the scream rang out again. This time, it was louder, more desperate. His blood ran cold. It seemed to come from his neighbor Amara's house. Without hesitation, Obina dashed outside. Through her open bedroom window, he saw her thrashing on her bed, her mouth moving but no coherent words forming. Her hands clawed at her throat, and though her lips trembled in whispered prayers, she looked as if she were choking. As he stood frozen, he noticed movement above her roof. Slowly, he raised his torchlight. His breath hitched. Perched atop the zinc roof were 3 massive black owls. Their glossy feathers glistened under the moonlight, and their eyes, bright, unnatural, glowing red, bored into him. They didn't move, didn't flinch, as though daring him to act. Gritting his teeth, Obina picked up a stone from the ground and hurled it with all his strength. The stone struck one of the birds squarely in the chest, and they screeched in unison. With powerful flaps of their wings, they rose into the air and vanished into the night. Minutes later, Amara stumbled out of her house, clutching her chest and gasping for air. Sweat drenched her nightgown, and her face was ashen. Obina rushed to her side and helped her sit on a bench. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I was having a nightmare," she stammered. 3 women, old, terrifying, were chasing me. They looked furious. I tried to run, but they were faster. They grabbed me and started stabbing me. Over and over. That's when I screamed. Obina's jaw tightened. "This isn't just a nightmare, Amara," he said gravely. "You're under spiritual attack. You need to pray." Amara nodded shakily and went back inside. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, but the morning brought new horrors. When Amara showed Obina her back, he recoiled in shock. 3 deep, jagged marks ran from her neck to her lower spine. The wounds oozed a thick, yellowish pus. "These aren't normal scratches," Obina muttered, his face dark with concern. "These marks, they're poisoned. Whoever attacked you isn't human. This is witchcraft." Amara's eyes widened in terror. "But why me?" she whispered. "I don't remember offending anyone." Obina looked at her closely. "Think carefully. Did you say or do anything recently that might have provoked someone's jealousy or anger?" Amara's brows furrowed as she thought back. Finally, she said, "Yesterday, I went to the salon to make my hair. There were 2 other women there, and we were all chatting. I mentioned my boyfriend. I told them how generous he is, how he pays for everything I need. I was just making conversation. Obinna sighed heavily. Amara, you've shared too much with strangers. Not everyone who listens to you is happy for you. Jealousy is a dangerous thing. That night, Obinna stayed vigilant, armed with a pile of stones by his door. The clock struck 1 a.m., and just as he feared, the scream echoed again. He rushed out to see the same 3 black owls perched on Amara's roof. Their glowing eyes stared at him, unblinking, as if mocking his efforts. This time, Obinna didn't hesitate. He grabbed a stone and hurled it at one of the birds. The projectile struck its head, and the owl let out a high-pitched screech before falling to the ground. It convulsed violently for a moment, then stilled. Dead. Amara emerged from her house, along with several other neighbors who had been awakened by the commotion. They gathered around the lifeless bird, its once red eyes now dull and lifeless. Obinna shared what had happened, his voice firm but somber. 2 days later, as Amara walked past the salon, she noticed it was eerily silent, the doors locked. Upon inquiry, she learned the hairdresser had fallen gravely ill and died the morning after the owl was killed. The news sent chills down her spine. She rushed to Obinna with the revelation. That woman, Obinna said slowly, his voice heavy with certainty. She was one of them. One of the witches. Amara's hands trembled. Then what about the other 2, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Obinna frowned. Witches never work alone. If one is dead, the others will seek revenge or retreat. We must pray for complete protection. That night, as they prayed together, a violent wind swept through the compound. Obinna's ears picked up faint whispers carried by the breeze, voices murmuring in anger and frustration. He looked up to see 2 black owls circling high above, their silhouettes barely visible against the moonlight. Do not stop praying, he shouted. The owls screeched and suddenly darted away into the darkness, disappearing beyond the horizon. Obinna knew they were fleeing, but they were not gone for good. They've retreated, for now, he said grimly. But they'll be watching. Over the next week, Amara remained vigilant, her prayers constant. Her scars began to fade completely, but she remained haunted by the ordeal. One night, as Obinna slept, he dreamed of an ancient shrine surrounded by dense forest. There, he saw 2 women, one with piercing eyes and the other with a face covered in tribal markings, chanting in a language he didn't understand. Between them was a pot filled with boiling black liquid, and in the bubbling brew floated an owl's feather. When he awoke, Obinna knew what he had to do. They are regrouping, he told Amara. But their power has been weakened. If we remain steadfast in prayer, they cannot harm you again. 2 weeks later, word spread that another woman from the salon, one of those present during Amara's visit, had also fallen mysteriously ill and died. Obinna and Amara took it as a sign the witches were losing their power, and divine justice was prevailing. The 3rd witch was never seen again. Whether she had fled the town or succumbed to her own dark arts remained a mystery. But for Amara and Obinna, the ordeal left them with a valuable lesson: not everyone is happy for your success, and some victories are best kept private.